The void beyond the Perseus expanse was supposed to be silent. It was a dead region of space, uncharted, barren, and far from any known civilizations. No trade routes passed through it, no colonies thrived in its vacuum. Yet, in that silence, a signal pulsed, weak, faint, a whisper of something long forgotten. It was purely by chance that the Terran Outer Fleet monitoring station Theta 9 detected it. The outpost, a lonely sentinel at the edge of colonized space, had been listening for signs of new life forms or potential threats from the unknown. Instead, it picked up something no one expected, an ancient distress signal. This can't be right. The technician at the monitoring station, Lieutenant Carson Rowe, frowned at his console. He double-checked the transmission's frequency, then triple-checked the timestamp. The signal wasn't new. It had been traveling for thousands of years, and yet somehow it was still active. More unsettling than its age was its origin. The signal wasn't alien. It was broadcasting in an archaic human frequency, one that hadn't been used since the earliest days of Earth's radio technology. Theta 9 quickly escalated the finding to Terran Command, and within hours, a decision was made. A reconnaissance mission was authorized. A small but elite crew was assembled to investigate. Their ship, the TSV Endeavour, was a long-range exploration vessel designed for deep space reconnaissance. Equipped with cutting-edge stealth technology, it was perfect for navigating the unknown without drawing attention. The crew of 6, hand-picked for their expertise, included Commander Elias Kane, a veteran officer known for his sharp instincts and unwavering resolve; Dr. Mira Vasquez, a xenolinguist and historian specializing in ancient alien and human records; Lieutenant Dorian Hayes, a combat officer, skilled in both ground and shipboard engagements; Chief Engineer Ralek Voss, a half-human, half-Martian technician, renowned for his ability to jury-rig solutions under pressure; Navigator Celia Markov, an expert in stellar cartography, responsible for guiding the Endeavour through uncharted regions; Ensign Leo Park, a young but talented communications specialist, tasked with decrypting and analyzing signals. Their mission was simple: trace the signal, investigate its origin, and report their findings. A standard deep space survey, at least, that's what they were told. But from the moment they entered the expanse, things felt wrong. The derelict, after 3 days of travel, the Endeavour reached the coordinates of the distress signal. The source was floating in the void, adrift near a dead, lightless star. It was a ship, or at least what remained of one. The vessel was massive, nearly the size of a battleship, but its design was unlike anything in the Terran archives. It had no markings, no insignia, no visible propulsion systems. Scans revealed that the hull was composed of an unknown alloy, one that registered as older than any recorded human or alien civilization. As the Endeavour drew closer, the signal changed. The static broke. Words formed. A message played. It was no longer just a distress call. It was a warning, and it called them by name. The TSV Endeavour drifted in the silence of space, its dark hull blending into the cosmic abyss. The crew stood tense at their stations, eyes locked on the ancient ship before them. It was a behemoth, floating like a ghost in the void. There were no lights, no movement, just the cold, indifferent presence of something long abandoned, yet the signal was still broadcasting. Commander Elias Kane stared at the ship through the viewport, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but protocol dictated otherwise. The Terran command had given them orders: investigate, document, and, if possible, recover any relevant data. Dr. Vasquez, Kane said, voice steady but firm. How? Certain are you that this is a human transmission? Dr. Mira Vasquez was already running linguistic decryption algorithms, fingers moving swiftly across her console, her brow furrowed as she studied the patterns. It's human, she confirmed. But it's old. Very old. This isn't just pre-FTL tech. It predates the colonial era by at least 20,000 years. Silence filled the bridge. That's impossible, Dorian Hayes muttered. The combat officer shifted uneasily in his seat. Humanity wasn't even spacefaring that long ago. And yet, Vasquez said, bringing up the waveforms of the Transmission. This language structure is unmistakable. It shares phonetic similarities with ancient Earth dialects, long before our recorded history should allow for interstellar travel. The bridge of the Endeavor was deathly silent. The message still echoed through the comms, its final words hanging like a noose in the air. They are waking up. A shiver ran through Dr. Vasquez as she ran the transmission through every filter she had. There was something wrong with the way the voice sounded. Something unnatural. It wasn't just age, it was corruption. As if the speaker had been speaking across time itself, struggling to be heard through the void. "Commander," Leo Park called from his station, voice tense. "We're picking up a faint energy surge from the derelict. It's weak, but it's growing." "How weak?" Kane asked. Park hesitated. "Less than 5% of our reactor output. Barely a flicker. But it's there." Kane's jaw tightened. Could it be a reactor boot-up sequence? Voss, the ship's chief engineer, shook his head. "Not likely. A ship that old wouldn't just wake up from dormancy like this. Something external must have triggered it. Like us." The words belonged to Hayes, and he wasn't wrong. The Endeavor's arrival, the scans, the comms link. Any of it could have stirred something inside that ancient wreck. Vasquez's hands trembled slightly as she worked. "There's something embedded in the signal," she muttered, her voice low. "Something deep. It's almost like an overlay." Markov turned to her. "A layered transmission?" "No, not exactly." Vasquez's brows furrowed. "It's as if the voice is piggybacking on another signal." Kane stepped forward. "Can you isolate the original?" "I can try." Her fingers moved fast, peeling back the layers of distortion, filtering out the static. Then, through the speakers, a different sound emerged. A whispering, scratching sound. Like claws against metal. Like breathing in a vacuum. It wasn't words. It was something else. Then the sensors screamed. A dozen alarms flared to life across the bridge. Readings spiked, and the derelict ship, silent and dead just moments ago, now registered movement. Not mechanical movement. Biological. "There's something inside that ship," Hayes breathed. "Multiple heat signatures. They're shifting." Markov's face drained of color. "The wreck had no power a minute ago. How are their life signs?" Before anyone could answer, the Endeavor's comms flared again. The voice returned, but this time it was screaming. "Run!" Then the signal cut. Static roared through the bridge. The sensors flashed red. Something was coming. Kane didn't hesitate. "Full reverse now!" The Endeavor's engines roared to life, pushing the ship backward at maximum thrust, but it was too late. From the depths of the ancient wreck, shadows began to move, and then the first tendrils of something alive began to reach out. The Endeavor's thrusters roared as the ship pulled back, but the abyss was already unfolding. The derelict was no longer just a wreck. It was a thing awakening. Kane gripped the railing as the first tendrils lashed out from the massive hulk. They weren't mechanical, nor were they organic in the way life was supposed to be. They were something in between, dark, shifting appendages that pulsed like flesh, yet moved with eerie, unnatural precision. "Contact!" Hayes barked, fingers tight around his console. "Something's reaching toward us, closing fast. Raise shields!" Kane ordered. The Endeavor's energy barriers flared to life just as the first tendril struck. The impact sent a tremor through the hull, making the lights flicker. The shield held, for now. "Scanning." Vasquez's voice was sharp, urgent. "I don't know what that thing is, but—" She stopped. Her breath hitched. "What?" Kane demanded. I don't think it's attacking us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's feeling us, like it's trying to understand what we are." Markov let out a shaky breath. "Well, that's not better." A second, tendril coiled against the shield, then a third, each wrapping tighter. The energy levels of the Endeavor's defenses began dropping, not from brute force, but from something else. "It's draining our shields," Voss warned. "We need to break free before—" The tendrils tightened. A sound echoed through the ship. A deep, reverberating hum that wasn't just external. It was inside their heads, inside their bones. Kane's vision blurred for half a second, his mind suddenly flooded with images. Not his memories, not human memories. A war, a hunger, a consumption so vast it had no end. Then a single, horrific realization struck him. This wasn't a distress call. It was a lure. The ship had never been abandoned. It had been left behind, a trap, waiting for something, anything, to come close. Enough to feed upon. Kane wrenched himself back to reality just as alarms blared. "We're losing power," Park shouted. "It's siphoning us dry. Systems are dropping." "We need weapons," Hayes growled. Kane hesitated. Firing might provoke. It might wake it up fully, or maybe it already had. A low, distant rumble rolled through space. Not from the derelict, from the things inside it. For the first time, the ship's sensors detected true movement. Not just heat signatures, but bodies. Crawling. Swarming. And then, one by one, they turned, toward the Endeavor. Then the whispering started. Not from the comms, from the walls, from the air inside the ship. Not words, just hunger. Kane made his choice. "All forward batteries," he commanded, voice cold as steel. "Fire, the Endeavors." Forward batteries roared to life, spewing beams of superheated plasma and high-velocity rail slugs into the abyss. The tendrils gripping the ship's shields shuddered, recoiling as energy seared through them. But they didn't break. They twisted, adapted, fed. Kane's blood ran cold. The weapons weren't damaging them. They were changing them. Confirmed. "Hit," Hayes reported. But his voice was flat, uncertain. "But sir, I don't think it's working." The tendrils, once shifting and pulsating, now solidified into something sharper, something denser. They moved differently now, faster, like they had learned something, and the whispers in the ship's walls grew louder. "They're evolving," Vasquez murmured, her hands flying across the scanners. "They're adapting to our attacks in real time." Markov's face was pale. "That's impossible." But it wasn't. Something stirred within the wreckage. Then, the real horror revealed itself. The derelict moved. For centuries, it had been adrift, a corpse of a ship. But now, in the depths of its hollow, forgotten corridors, something had woken up. And it wasn't just the tendrils. It was the things inside. Through the flickering viewport screens, they saw them. Dark, skeletal shapes, climbing through the remains of the ancient vessel. Some were humanoid. Some were not. Their forms flickered, as if they existed between dimensions, phasing in and out of reality. And they were looking directly at them. Then, a voice. Not from the comms, not from any single place. More fuel. Vasquez's breath caught in her throat. Did anyone else hear that? Kane forced himself to stay steady. Weapons, full spread. Fire again. The Endeavor unleashed another. Volley. The main cannons belched plasma. The kinetic turrets ripped rail slugs into the void. A barrage of missiles streaked through space. And this time, something screamed. The tendrils jerked back, recoiling like a wounded beast. The ancient ship shuddered, its frame creaking under some unseen force. For the first time, it reacted, and then it lunged. With a sudden burst of impossible speed, the derelict ship closed the distance, its ruined hull moving like something alive. Evasive maneuvers. Kane shouted. Voss yanked the controls. The Endeavor rolled hard to starboard, engines flaring. The void twisted, the ancient hulk moving with nightmarish agility. And then it opened. A rift. A mouth of shattered metal and writhing shadows unfolding from the ship's broken hull. It was not an airlock, not a hangar. It was a maw. Vasquez's fingers flew across the scanners. "That's not a ship anymore," she whispered, terror creeping into her voice. "It's a living thing." The Endeavor barely twisted away in time, the edge of the derelict's maw scraping the shields, sending another pulse of distortion rippling through their systems. But it wasn't trying to crush them. It was trying to pull them in. Kane clenched. His teeth. They had to break free. Now! "Charge the FTL drive," he ordered. Park spun in his seat. "We can't jump this close to the anomaly. We'll do it anyway." The whispers in the ship rose to a crescendo. Then, from the derelict, the voice returned. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a command. Stay. A blast wave erupted from the wreck, slamming into the Endeavor. Lights flickered. Gravity stuttered. Every screen flashed red. And then, they lost control. The ship stopped moving, as if something had them, and the derelict's hunger closed in. The Endeavor was trapped. Kane's hands were like iron on the command console. Every display flashed error warnings, their engines unresponsive, their thrusters dead in the water. It was as if the very laws of physics had been twisted around them, as though the derelict ship's will had rewritten reality itself. Emergency. Thrusters! Fire everything we've got! Kane barked. Voss slammed the controls. The backup engines roared, blue plasma spitting from the ship's rear, but nothing. The ship didn't move. Not an inch. Outside, the ancient vessel pulsed, its ruined frame stretching and shifting like something that was no longer bound by simple metal and matter. The maw at its core yawned wider, a void beyond light, beyond logic. It wasn't pulling them in with gravity. It was pulling them in with something else. Park's voice was hoarse. This isn't natural. This isn't... He swallowed. Sir, we need to... A new voice interrupted him. Not human, not mechanical, a deep, resonant chorus that seemed to come from every surface, every molecule of the air around them. Welcome. The bridge plunged into silence. Kane's pulse thundered in his ears. He turned, scanning the crew. Each one frozen in place, every breath held. And then the whispering started inside their minds. Images. Flashing. Impossible. Ancient memories. A world drowning in darkness. A fleet, once mighty, swallowed whole. A species, countless and unknowable, their forms shifting through time, their voices screaming in languages that had long since died. And then, the final transmission. Warning, sent before the fall. A signal, drifting through the void for thousands of years. A distress call. Vasquez choked out a whisper. The message. It wasn't calling for help. Kane understood now. It had been a lure, a trap, and they had answered. The tendrils of the ancient ship snaked forward, coiling against the Endeavor's hull, pressing closer, feeling their structure. The hull moaned under the pressure, metal straining, and then the walls breathed. Kane saw it, just for an instant. The very metal of their own ship rippling, shifting, as if something inside was stirring. Something was spreading, taking hold. Then, from deep within the derelict, something moved. It was tall, lithe, its form unstable, shifting between humanoid and something else entirely. Its body crawled with flickering symbols, glyphs from a civilization that no longer existed. Its face, if it had one, was obscured, a void of shifting shadows and searing red light. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in thought. Single command, pressed into Kane's mind with the force of 1,000 voices, a single will impossible to resist. Join. Pain. Searing, mind-shattering pain. Kane fell to his knees, clutching his head. He could feel something inside him changing, a presence invading, creeping into the spaces between his thoughts, his memories. It was not just inside him, it was inside all of them. And then, it stopped. Not because the entity chose to halt, but because something else had entered the battlefield. A new presence. Something even older, even deadlier, and it had answered the call. A new force entered the void. Not as a ship, not as a fleet, as a presence. A shadow darker than the abyss. A shape that warped the very fabric of reality, its arrival sending a pulse through space that silenced the creeping entity aboard the derelict. For the first time since this nightmare began, the whispering stopped. The pain in Kane's skull vanished, ripped away as if it had never been. The bridge lights flickered. Monitors flashed. Screens, momentarily filling with lines of unreadable code before stabilizing. The ship's systems, dead only moments ago, roared back to life. Something was happening. Kane staggered to his feet, drenched in sweat, eyes locked on the view screen. The derelict, so terrifying, so impossibly ancient, was changing, for the First time since their arrival, it reacted. It feared. Park's voice was barely a whisper. "What the hell is that?" No one could answer. Because even in all their knowledge, all their scans, all their experience navigating the void, there were no records of this. No name, no data, no warnings, nothing. A silent force, beyond time, beyond history, had answered the call, and the galaxy itself trembled. The new arrival did not manifest as something recognizable. No ships, no fleets, just an impossibility. A wound in space, a shifting absence where light refused to exist, bending reality around it like the event horizon of a dying star. The entity aboard the derelict knew what had come, and it screamed. Not in sound, not in words, but in raw, ancient terror. The symbols on the derelict's surface flared with unnatural energy. The ship, so long dead, tried to move, tried to flee. But the presence that had come did not allow it. It reached. Reality itself folded inward as tendrils of pure darkness, or something beyond darkness, extended from the wound in space. They did not touch the derelict. They did not need to. With a single, unnatural pulse, the entity aboard the ancient ship was torn from existence. One moment it was there. The next, gone. No explosion, no debris, just erasure. And then, the derelict collapsed in on itself. Like a dying star reaching the end of its life, its very mass shrieked as it was pulled inward, into nothingness, a death beyond death. Silence returned to the bridge of the Endeavor. Kane breathed, slow and shallow, staring into the void where the derelict had been, where the nightmare had ended, and where something far worse still remained. Because the new presence, whatever it was, did not leave. It did not retreat. It simply existed, watching, waiting. Not for them, for something else. Voss swallowed. "Sir, what do we do?" Kane's jaw tightened. There was only one answer. We leave. Now. No hesitation, no questions. Whatever this force was, it had saved them, but it had not saved them out of kindness. It had not intervened for their sake. It had done so because this was its domain, and the thing aboard the derelict was not welcome here. Kane didn't want to know what that meant. Didn't want to know what rules governed this dark stretch of space. He only knew one thing. They were never meant to be here. And if they ever heard another distress call like this one, they would never answer again.